Okay folks, hold on to your chairs, this is gonna be a long one. I'm Thomas and this is Pilot's Workshop. In our Workbench series, we so far managed to build the top frame assembly that gives rigidity to the entire construction, with its huge dovetailed connections. In this episode, we are going to make the entire leg assembly from scratch. There's a lot to tell, so let's get started. The leg assembly is the only part of the workbench that is made from massive timber elements. So while the quality, cut and grain of the raw material for the laminated beams was not crucial, we have to be more careful with choosing the right pieces of wood for the different parts of the leg assembly.
The entire undercarriage of the workbench is constructed from these 98 by 98 millimeter beams that I bought in the Home Depot. Simply because I don't have any sawmills in my close surrounding, so the Home Depot is more comfortable for that kind of stuff. With these large beams, you don't really have a big choice of how they are cut. But even though I bought all my pieces months ago, I still here in the workshop have the ability to choose which of the beams I will use for what part of the workbench. Now each of them is 2 meters long, so far longer than I need them. And they're 98 by 98 millimeters. In the end, when I plane them down, they will be 90 by 90 millimeters. So I will plane down an area of around 4 millimeters all around the edge, making the final beam something like this. Even though these are not top quality beams, I can still choose which piece is best for what area of the workbench. And the rule that I follow when I want to choose them is that the longer the final piece will be, the less I want it to warp and crack in the future. And warping and cracking of wood usually happens when the heart of the wood is still in the beam. Like you can see here, and here, and here, and here. So for the longer pieces, I want to have as little heart as possible. So I chose these two for the two long stretchers of the undercarriage. And when you push these two on top of each other, you can even see that they by chance even came from the same tree. The heart of this tree would have been around here and is fairly outside of the beams. So they are not very likely to crack in the years to come. For the vertical pieces of the workbench that carry the most load, I want to choose these two. They have a little bit of heart in the corner, but they are not cracked or warped along their entire length. They don't have many branches or knobs, and they have a fairly straight grain. So these will be perfect for those 4 legs. The beam on the left also is almost clear of the heart, but it has many knobs and more difficult grain along the length. So this one I will use for the 2 horizontal legs that will carry the load of the workbench. And then finally this part down here. Here the heart is very far into the perimeter of the beam, and you can see how it already cracked. These cracks go along almost the entire length of the beam. So this is the lowest quality piece that I have here. So I will use this beam for the 2 parts in the undercarriage that only carry any load when the wheels are down, so that it doesn't matter what happens to these beams if they will crack or warp in the future, as they only help with transporting the workbench. So when I start working on the leg structure of the workbench, I first cut my beams to rough length, leaving them a couple of centimeters too long, so that I cut them to final shape and length once they are planed. However, I want to really cut them to the rough length before planing, because it makes the planing process much easier, as I don't have to push such big beams. Also, cutting these beams into shorter pieces before planing them gets rid of most of the warping, because if a beam is twisted along its length, it adds up over the entire length. And when I basically cut the beam in 2 before I start planing it, I also cut down the twist in the beam in 2. So I get away with planing off less material and still getting a perfectly straight and smooth beam.
After everything is smooth and planed to dimension, the positions of mortises, tenons and other details can be marked. Because the workbench has visible mortise and tenon joints, where the tenon protrudes all the way through the opposing piece, I leave the tenons 2 to 3 centimeters too long, so they can be cut off later. This makes for a more relaxing assembly process that forgives small errors. If you have a bandsaw, cutting tenons, radii and cutting to length goes fairly quickly. If not, a handsaw can do the trick as well. It will simply take a bit longer and the radii are best left out or done with a rasp and sandpaper. For the 20mm bolts of my heavy-duty steel feet, I drill 25mm holes just to have a little bit of slack for any case. If you have a mortising machine, cutting mortises will be a quick step as well. But since I don't have one, I first take out the bulk of the material with a drill and then use my chisels to make a clean mortise. After all those connectors have been cut, each joint should be tried out, and the pairs should be marked to allow for a quick assembly later. Every mortise and tenon joint will be secured with a wooden pin. Before putting the leg assembly together for a test fit, the position of every pin is marked and drilled at each mortise. Then all parts can be put together without glue to see if everything matches up and all connectors have been cut correctly. If all joints go together smoothly, the position of the pins can be transferred to the tenons using the same drill that was used for drilling the holes. And now comes an awesome trick that I learned at the Wood Whisperers channel. Move the position of the pinhole in the tenons up towards the part by about 3 to 4 millimeters. This way the pin will pull the two pieces together at the assembly. The effect of that you will see in a minute. First we drill the holes at their newly marked positions. Then we prepare the pins themselves. For the large joints of the workbench I am using 10mm dowels. I cut them about 3 to 4 centimeters too long, so the ends can be cut off after the glue up. Because of the shifted pinhole in the tenons, the pins need to receive a pointy end so that they will be able to catch that shifted pinhole. We finally arrived at the big moment. Liberal amounts of glue can be spread in and on each joint at a time. Once again, I enjoy having that PVC floor, so I can just let my glue drip away. Once a joint is put together as far as it will go, the pin can be inserted, pointy end first, and hammered in. And now you can see the amazing effect of that shifted pinhole in the tenons. The pin pulls both elements together with huge force, closing the gap in between much tighter than simple clamps could have done. In addition to that, the joint is immediately strong enough to be moved around, so the assembly can continue straight away without having to fear that the joint opens up again or ends up crooked. Once all parts were glued up and the glue was still fresh, I checked both diagonals of the leg assembly, like before on the tabletop frame. If both diagonals are equal, the entire frame is square. In my case, I measured a small difference. So I squeezed the longer diagonal with clamps so the glue can set with the assembly being perfectly square. After the glue had dried, I took off the clamps, measured again, and saw that the frame stayed perfectly square. Next, the ends of the tenons and pins can be cut off. Many people would probably prefer to leave the tenons sticking out a bit as a decorative element, myself included. But since I see the workbench as a tool first, I want it to be as practical as possible. And anything overhanging will be a spot for cables to get stuck, so I made mine flush. The final parts to completing the leg assembly are the small cross members. While those had a structural role in the top frame and were connected with dovetails, the ones in the leg assembly only help to carry the weight of the cabinets and drawers which will be made in that space. So those parts will simply be notched into the long leg beams. The cross members itself I already prepared when I made the ones for the top frame in the last episode. After marking up all positions, the notches are made in the same way that we saw in the previous episode. The initial cuts are made with a hand saw, so that the bulk of the waste material can be knocked out with a chisel. And the bottom is being cleared up using a handheld router with a flush cutting bit. Once everything fits, glue can be applied once again and the elements can be put in place. Finally, clamps make for a good and tight joint. Now it would be smart to wipe off the glue squeeze out with a wet rag, but I prefer to go the hard way, by sanding it off after it dried. And I simply forgot. After that glue is dry as well, what's left to do in this moment is an overall fine sanding. At last, to prepare for the steps in the following episodes, The leg assembly and our top frame receive a layer of linseed oil. So that's it, guys. The leg assembly is finished. In the next episode we will take care of the retractable wheels for the workbench. So see you then. This is Pilot's Workshop. Thank you for watching. I really need a dust collector.